This is kind of embarrassing. I had planned to attend the sync session live with everyone, but I did not get the timing right on that. So I'm sorry, but I will try not to take too much time with this. I'm going to start a little bit slow and boring, but it'll finish strong. Hopefully not too boring, actually. So what we've got here in the presentation is the outline that was part of the instructions for the sync session, but in addition to these bullet points that are included or that are supposed to be included is kind of an identity of those in keeping with the system security plan. So now you know ahead of time what I'll be boring you with. The first part, the first bullet that you saw on the previous slide was the baseline analysis results. You can see on this slide, if you look closely, these are all of the specifics of my home computer system. This is a home computer system that this analysis is based on, but it's obviously not completely shielded from risks. It's a home computer system, but we'll look at it as this would be breaking down a report for a large corporate business. Interruptions or breaches have to be accounted for because they're going to put your business in jeopardy. You're going to break down the system similar to how I got the general technical description of my own computer system, but we're going to consider this for the purposes of the analysis as a federal system in the high risk category that would be defined in the FIPS 199 and 200. So one of the first things that you're going to be taking care of in doing the system security plan is presenting your potential vulnerabilities. There's 3 columns here on this slide, but the objectives of a vulnerabilities report is to identify threat vectors that you should be protecting against. In the case of a vulnerability report for a computer network, the ways that the system can be interrupted, disrupted, or denied are all going to represent threats in addition to traditional compromises of data and passwords. So for the systems, in this scenario, this would be the way that you could categorize it. You have a vector, which would be your network, or you could some viruses that could come in, or maybe the way you back up your system. Those are going to be in your left-hand column here, and then you see what the details are that vector might approach your system from, and then in the right-hand column, what your intent would be to either mitigate that problem or things that you could do to basically harden the system against those threats. So if this is my computer, this is my system at home, these are filling that out in a way that would represent that being accomplished. So certification test matrix plan is one of the documents that needs to be included in your certification package. There's several system authorization methodologies that have extensive requirements and abundance of documentation to prove that security has been properly addressed. This particular grid graph chart here is directly from our course text. The items here in red, this represents the plan. You're going to see in a slide later how this plan is implemented. You see on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6th column, the actual results. This is blank because it's a plan. So you're going to fill in. You can go back to your risk, your baseline analysis, and then the potential vulnerabilities, and you're going to see where your vulnerabilities are in that second column there. And then you're going to identify what the things are that you'll do about it, and then what you expect that to do to mitigate your problems. Ideally, you're going to end up with, by the time you've wrapped this up, a certification statement that says you're good to go. It's really the conclusion of your SSP, but this is also an appendix to it, and the elements of the certification statement are not just a gold star or a stamp that says you passed, but it's going to include 5 different categories that are part of validating the certification statement. So you're going to have a background that's going to say when you did it, who accomplished it, what the standards were. You're going to include a summary of findings that will say these are the things that we identified that were either solid or that needed additional risk mitigation. Then you're going to have a section called Statement of Compliance, where you're going to say this is where everything works out. It doesn't have to be 100% compliant with the standards, but it has to make sure that whatever it is that is not compliant doesn't represent a greater risk than what you're willing to accept, and that what won't put the rest of your system at a potential to be compromised. This is not something that you come up with on your own. It's something that is within the ranges that are determined by the NIST guidelines, National Institute of Standards and Technology guidelines. You'll have some recommendations for how to proceed with this, not just for this final state, but for moving forward, so that if it needs to be tested again to remain in compliance, that will be part of the recommendations. And then finally, the certification statement of this whole annex is an actual statement, but there'd be the section of that is where the approving authorities are identified, and the guidelines that were by which this was conducted, and then finally whether or not this was approved, denied, or returned for further action. And it'll be signed by the CISO for your organization. They're going to be the ones that say you're actually good to go. We want to identify some obstacles for our network, and this is my home network, so that it's going to have some different obstacles than there would be for a large organization, but largely they're going to be the same. The way that things are connected, what the backup systems are, who you're going to be interacting with, but you need to be identifying the appropriate minimum security baselines, and that's going to be coming from SP 800-53 from the NIST, and you're going to go through a thorough description of how all of these security controls are applicable to the baseline. The description of this, you might have this chart for your organization, but the description also needs to include the security control title, how the security control is being implemented or planned to be implemented, and any scoping guidance that has been applied and what type of consideration. And then finally indicate if the security controls is a common control and who's responsible for implementing it. Who is the person that is going to get you around these obstacles, or is going to be responsible for it. So I mentioned earlier that the recommendations are going to be how you fix it, how it gets done. And in the risk remediation plan, you're going to identify what it was that you were working against, and then how that actually was implemented. It is the formal tie between corrective action and the risk that it's designed to fix. And a risk remediation plan can look like this. Again, this is taken directly from our course text, and this is where you identify not just what you did, but the reference documents that brought you to the conclusion of this being the appropriate course of action. So I promise to try to go fast with this. I hope that it was fun enough. It was definitely fun in the course with you guys. Overall, what you're looking at here is the first 4 pages of my report, and it covered the system security plan, which we looked at the system environment, the SCAR, the Security Controls Assessment Report, the risk assessment outline, how you would identify what it is that you're looking to protect against, how you would go about certifying that, what your remediation plan would include, including the actual results of implementing it, and then a certification statement, and finally an accreditation letter that is part of the system security plan. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to it. Again, I apologize that I wasn't in the class with you guys to present this live, but now it gets saved for all eternity. Y'all have a good night.